Hello, my name's Nathaniel and I'm with Appalachian Feet. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about making kombucha. Kombucha is a fermented tea beverage. It's made by fermenting a sweet tea, and to get the fermentation you use something that is called a mother, or oftentimes referred to as a SCOBY, which is an acronym, SCOBY. It stands for Symbiotic Colony of Bacteria and Yeast. It's kind of a weird looking thing. It's this rubbery mat, and I will take it out in a little bit and you can see it a little bit closer. But by putting it into the fermented tea, or the sweet tea, it will cause a fermentation which will make a kind of tangy, sour, tea-like beverage that you can drink. Reputed to have a lot of probiotic qualities to it. It's becoming very popular amongst the health community and people who just like fermented foods. So I'm going to talk a little bit about making it. I guess I'll get started by talking about what you'll need essentially to make it. First and foremost, you're going to need a SCOBY or some other starter. If you go online and you look up kombucha starter, you can actually order some starters online. They won't come as a SCOBY, they'll come as a liquid that you'll pour into your tea mixture. Additionally, I've heard reports about how you can buy commercial kombucha that you can buy in bottles at stores, and you can actually pour that into mixtures. I haven't tried that myself, so I don't know how well that works, but I have read and heard about that. And thirdly, and this is how we actually started our kombucha, you can have a friend who has their own kombucha. In the process of making kombucha, additional mothers will be created, and then you can give them to friends and neighbors and whoever, and then they can start making their own. So friends of ours from Tyrant Farms gave us one of their mothers that was produced in their kombucha making, and then we started making our own batches of kombucha. Besides the SCOBY and the starter, you're going to need some tea. You're going to want to use plain black tea to start off your kombucha. You don't want to use anything that has essential oils in it, and that includes popular teas like Earl Grey. You don't want to use herbal teas that don't actually have any tea leaf in it, that are made from herbs or non-tea plants for brewing. Really, you just want a basic black tea. I chose to use this American Classic tea, which is produced locally here in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a really nice tea. It's a really strong flavored black tea, and I think it'll work really well with this kombucha. Beyond that, you're also going to need some kind of container. You don't want it to be a metal container because metal is going to produce off flavors. You want it to be something that's glass or plastic. I had this nice large glass jar, works perfect for this. You're going to want something to cover it up with. I've just got some basic cheesecloth that will keep stuff and sediment from getting into it. I'll actually probably also cover it with a piece of paper towel first, just to keep any fruit flies out. They tend to be attracted to it. In the tea itself, once you brew the tea up, and you can see I've already brewed it here, you want to make sure that the tea is able to cool down, and so that's why I brewed it ahead of time. But I've also added about a cup of sugar into here. I do a mixture of half a cup of brown sugar and half a cup of just refined white sugar. Some people use all white sugar. I've heard some people using other sugars too. But now that this is cooled down, I can go ahead and add the mother into it and get the fermentation process started. You can see that the mother is in this mason jar, and there's actually liquid around it. This is some of the kombucha from my last batch that I produced. I'm actually going to pour some of that kombucha into this batch because the acidity of this kombucha, which at this point is actually almost at a point of being like vinegar, is going to help prevent any other microbes from colonizing and starting to grow in there. Basically, it's going to prevent it from getting infected with something that I don't want in it. I'm going to take this off now, and I'm going to open up my jar of mothers. Be careful if you seal these jars up because they can become pressurized due to the fermentation. And I'm going to pull out one of my mothers. I actually have two SCOBYs in here right now because my last batch produced a second SCOBY. And you can look at this. It's not the most appealing thing. It's weird to think. It kind of feels like wet, blubbery rubber. Kind of slimy. It's actually a lot firmer than you would expect. Definitely not the most appealing looking thing, except for it creates a delicious tasting beverage. So I'm actually just literally going to slide this into my fermented tea here, and it will kind of Sink float, it's okay if it moves around over the course of the fermentation period. You may see it move around a bit. Preferably, it's good for it to be floating up more towards the top. And what you'll eventually see is a secondary mother that I have right here starting to form around the top. That's good. That means your mother and SCOBY is healthy and it's reproducing. If it sinks to the bottom and you don't see some other SCOBY forming, you might need to be concerned that your SCOBY's passed away. Additionally, I'm going to pour again some of this previous kombucha in here just to get the acidity up a little bit in this batch, so that as it gets started, nothing else colonizes in there. Pour a little bit more. So now the mother's in there. It's ready to get started. I'm going to cover it up again. I'm going to use some paper towel. You want some kind of porous material to keep it breathing so that air can get through. It shouldn't have any problem getting through paper towel. It's not very thick or anything. And then I'm also going to put this cheesecloth on top just to cover it up. Now you're going to want to move this whole jar to a relatively cool, dry place somewhere in your house. You don't want it to be freezing cold, but you also don't want it to be blazing heat. So if you just have a corner that's a little bit cooler than the rest of the house, that should be perfectly fine. You're going to let it sit for anywhere from 5 to 8 days or so. You may want to taste it periodically around that point to determine if it's gotten sour enough for your liking. And once it gets to a point that you think it tastes pretty good, you can remove the mother, you can put it into a container and put it in the fridge and start drinking it just like that. It's perfect and ready to go at that point. Some people, however, would really like and enjoy other flavors in this, because really at that point it's just going to taste kind of sour sweet tea. To add other flavors, after you've already let it ferment for about a week or so, you can add things like herbs and spices, you can add bits of fruit, you can add honey. You can also bottle condition it by putting it in individual bottles, like beer bottles, Grolsch bottles. Let it sit for a few additional days, and it will get a little bit of carbonation in it to make it a little bubbly on top of its sour flavor. But it's a really refreshing drink. It's great for the summertime, and it's not hard at all to make. I hope this was informative. I hope you have some luck making your own kombucha, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.